Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. We have some things to talk about today, and we have a pre-show. Eck will be joining us shortly, and as you see, I'm wearing a different Yankees cap, not the traditional interlocking NY, but
oh, don't start with the interlocking NY, please.
But this is one more day. By tomorrow, I'll have my hair cut completely. I'll be looking beautiful, and
yeah, beautiful.
Yes, beautiful. But we'll start the show with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So Faye Vincent came out yesterday. Somebody interviewed him, and I think it's poignant because he basically said, if the owners are trying to break the union, it's not going to happen. And he said it looks a lot like 94, 95, and I've told you I've written a book about it. People can go read it on Amazon if they'd like. Mm-hmm. Just look up my name, Russ Cohen. It's called Strike Three. It really, again, writing that book after the fact, it was years after, with Nico's help, who we do our baseball show with, it really did give me chills, like this is the same thing over again. And people are basically saying the same things over again. Right. Media, fans, all of it. And you would hope Rob Manfred would take Faye Vincent's advice, but I think he's only taken Bud Selig's advice and nobody else. And Selig didn't have to deal with it.
See, I don't think he's taking Bud Selig's advice. I think he's taking the owner's advice, and this is the road they want to go down. Because remember, like the NHL, Gary Bettman serves at the pleasure of the owners, and I think this is Rob Manfred is the mouthpiece for the owners.
Okay, so let's go with that premise, because we know that growing up, that wasn't the job of commissioners, and clearly, even though there were flaws with Kennesaw Mountain Landis, he was trying to save the game, whether you like him or not. But now the job has changed, and you're right, that is what their main job is. But at least I get the feeling that Adam Silver, Gary Bettman still care about how the fans view the sport. I don't get any feeling at all that Rob Manfred cares how the fans view the sport.
No, I don't think so. And I think you got to remember, again, I think one of the main reasons why the players in the NHL and the players in the NBA worked hand in hand with the league and with the owners is because they have a CBA where there's a 50-50 split of revenue, and they know that if they're going to take a bath financially, then that's going to be passed on to the players in terms of escrow. In in Major League Baseball, that's not the case. You've got again, it's the battle, the never-ending battle of millionaire players versus billionaire owners. And you've got situations here where, I'm sorry, I have no sympathy at all for a player who's like, I'm supposed to make $36 million and I'm going to play a third of a season and I'm only going to get 12. Cry me a friggin' river. I'll take $12 million right now. So, there's no...
it's funny, Mike? No one's going to pay you $12 million. No offense.
Well, we'll see about that. No, but
Eck, are you going to pay Mike $12 million?
No.
There you go.
You answered that too quickly. Come on.
Yeah, I know. No, because we're already paying him more than that. So that's the issue.
That's it. That's all I got.
Mike's already making twice that.
No, I just on my water. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Yeah, the baseball thing really is. I mean, I'm only following it like half-heartedly on the outs.
Sure.
But it's it is pretty crazy. I mean, it's just, to me, it is the fact it does not come off well, like at all. Like
right.
The optics of it as just like, and I'm like the perfect person to ask, because like a casual sports fan watching this, who doesn't really have like a whole lot of passion about baseball coming off or not coming off, it comes off everyone's very spoiled. Like like that's how it comes off from our side, from the side of things of that. So where hockey, they did a good job, and some players are back and starting to skate. There's fun in the air again, which is good.
Right.
Which is what we need. We need that, and we need entertainment. We need joy.
Yeah.
So baseball needs to figure that out. And I know baseball's been hit probably harder than anything by this in a lot of ways, like you've talked about.
Yeah, because they never got their season started, so that's fair.
They never got their season started. Plus the whole minor baseball teams and things like that have been destroyed by this is horrible. And the amount of careers that are going to be destroyed by this is horrible.
Because, although they caused some of it, but you're right.
Yeah, and hopefully that rebounds. Hopefully that rebounds in time, where we're just seeing a contraction that they wanted to do it, and now they have an excuse to do it. So you never know those things. So
yeah, and no show has more joy in the entire world than this show, right?
That's true. This show brings the joy every day. So let's begin. Let's begin bringing the joy, shall we?
Spread the joy.
We're going to talk to the Flyers today. That's why I wore my Colorado Avalanche Stadium Series jersey.
Yeah, I'm not touching that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I thought so. I just like this jersey. I think this is a cool jersey.
It's a cool jersey. I like it.
I think it is too. Like, I mean, it's like as close as they can come to being the Colorado Rockies again, but not.
Yes.
You know, like this is so close to the Colorado Rockies.
It is close. It does make you remember that.
Yeah, and I mean the Colorado Rockies. Let's all just say it right now. We're a horrible team.
Sure, but I remember Barry Beck with a good shoulder then.
Yeah, that's true. The only thing they had going for him was Barry Beck and like I think Doug Favell. You know, like
no Hardy Astrom. Come on.
Yeah, okay, but the thing about Colorado that that makes this jersey so cool and made that jersey so cool is this like the logo of the Colorado State flag, which is on just it's a reversing, but the Colorado State flag, which is on this, is a great friggin' state flag. I mean, that's just like that C is legendary. That's a great thing. So there you have it. All right, here comes the joy. Hello, Hockey World. It's Tuesday, June 9th, the happiest day of the year.
What year?
I'm not going to say the year anymore because the year sucks.
I'm Michael.
2020.
Yeah, I'm Michael Lagella. Yeah.
I don't know. In 2010, on this day, it may not have been joyful for some of the fans in our audience, but I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
What was that? What was 2010 on this day?
On this day,
could it be the hidden goal trick?
Oh, let's go back to that. And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And what was 20? Oh, well, this is the
Patrick Kane goal for sure.
Patrick Kane goal. Very, very interesting. 10 years ago. That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Good. What's funny about that is going back through some of the songs in my band, and we did a show during I probably already mentioned this at some point during that Boston series of that playoff round. We were doing a show in Game 7, and we recorded a Simon and Garfunkel song in that show.
What's
American Tune, which is like an amazing. It's a Paul Simon song, actually.
I'm not sure if I know that. Have I told you that he's a cousin of mine? But I only found it out last year.
And Paul Simon?
Yeah, a distant cousin. I did find that out. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So he is it through like Edie Brickell? No, so anyway, he that song, which is like a phenomenal song,
might be still my heart when you mention Edie Brickell,
and is on. well, the Simon and Garfunkel version of American Tune is on the Live from Central Park album, which is like one of the best albums of all time. So anyway, my band did a version of that song 10 years ago in that concert on that night, and then I was listening to that concert, and I realized this, and that song is like so apropos to what's happening right now in the world. So I may end up releasing that at some point this week, but yeah, it's kind of cool. Anyway, so let's get into let's talk about that goal for a second, Russ, because that was an interesting time. Let's just discuss it because we are talking Flyers today. We are going to get this is a Flyers day, and I try not to talk about the Flyers as much as Mike tries not to talk about the Maple Leafs. But so today we get to talk about the Flyers, and yesterday Mike got to talk about the Maple Leafs. Sorry, I wasn't here for that. But
I didn't talk about them too much though.
No, you should have. That was the whole.
I'm trying to be balanced.
I know. I'm just kidding, but I do. The Flyers. It's hard. Listen, I grew up. This is the city. This is the place where I'm credentialed in the press box. This is where I go to see games. So it's tough. So the Flyers, obviously are deep in my blood. My parents had season tickets since I was 12, so I've seen them grow. And this 2010 game, was about as intense as it could get. This was if you remember that series, that of course is the year that the Flyers were like miraculously there. Like they shouldn't have been there. They shouldn't have won. They shouldn't have gotten in. They got in on a shootout.
Yep. Which
faced, I think, Brian Boucher against Henrik Lundqvist. And when you go into that shootout, you're thinking, I don't like our odds. Like, I'm nothing against Boucher, but you're going against King Henry Lundqvist, and the Flyers were an awful shootout team. Remember, that's another thing about them. They've always been a terrible shootout team, but they were really bad that year too. Then they go to the playoffs, and of course,
hold on. I'm going to give you some insight too. So on another show that I do, Stick to Hockey with Jason Martinez, we had Brian Boucher on, and when they won the game, he actually tried to do Henrik Lundqvist's goal, win celebration thing with the pump in the air on one skate, and he fell backwards.
It's so funny that you say that because I remember him doing that, but I never knew that was what he was doing.
Yeah, he said he was trying to mock him just for the fun of it, and he fell backwards and said, kind of got egg on his face.
That's what you get for being a jerk, Boosh. That's what I would have said. That's no.
You can go back and watch it. It's funny to see.
I always remember talking to you because you went in and talked to Lundqvist, and that was like the downest you've ever seen him.
Yeah, it was, and I still hold that. So so they get past that game, Boston.
Right, they get through Boston, which is incredible. Like they're down. Incredible. They go to Chicago. They get into Chicago, and the series starts off. The Hawks, I think, kill them in game 1, if I remember right.
Sounds right.
And then the Flyers, and maybe game 2. Did they win both the first 2 games?
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because the way I think I remember this going was that the Flyers were down 3-1, won game 5 in Chicago. That's my memory of it. I don't know that I'm positive about that.
Hold on, I'll pull it up here.
Thanks, I think they were down. I think they were.
I thought they went down 2. It was definitely. I think they went down 2-0 for sure.
Okay, well, first of all, the Flyers beat New Jersey in the first round, 4-1.
Right. Yeah. Who cares about that? No one.
Right. No, I know. But
that meant a lot because the Flyers could never beat New Jersey.
I know, but nobody remembers that.
Yeah.
And then they were down 3-0 to Philadelphia or to Boston,
right.
and came back 5-4 in overtime, 4-0, 2-1, and then 4-3. But in that game 7, they were down 3-0 in the game and came back at 4-3.
That was an epic game.
Right. Then they beat Montreal in the conference final 4-1.
All right, so that series for a second.
That was a big deal. That was young Carey Price.
No, it wasn't.
Well, no, wasn't it Price?
That's Jarro Halak.
Oh, that was Halak all the way? Okay, because I know
they down in the same year Chicago and Washington in the first 2 rounds, which were the 2 best teams in the NHL. Like the records of the Blackhawks and the Penguins were the 2 best teams in the NHL, and Halak with Price out.
Yeah, Halak, he wasn't out. He was healthy, but Halak
he was healthy, but Halak had taken over.
Yeah, Halak was unbelievable. There was
incredible. And then he would go on the next season to sign somewhere else. But
if you remember that offseason, there were Montreal fans saying trade Price and keep.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So maybe it was the year before the Flyers chased Price, because I know there was a year in the playoffs they did chase him.
Yeah, they did. That's going back a little bit before that. I think the Price chase 2 years was like Robert Eschengo with the Flyers, something like that. I remember that vaguely.
Okay.
But this the Flyers, so a lot coming into that series. And the Canadians, the Flyers were still considered underdogs because that team had Montreal team, even though the Flyers had home. I know they didn't have home ice on anybody. That Montreal team was considered. I mean, they had just taken out the Capitals.
They had the edge.
They were, and the Flyers did what the Caps and Penguins for some reason didn't do, which is get in Halak's way, but just go crash the net, and that was the big difference because. For the Caps and Penguins were such skill finesse teams and everything. The Flyers played dirty, got in, right into the grill of Halak, and that bothered Halak, who's not the biggest goalie in the world.
Right.
So that was pretty interesting. So we got right in there and got together, and that was fun. And then we go to the Stanley Cup Finals. And Mike, what happens there?
Okay, first game was a 6-5 Blackhawk victory in Chicago.
Yes. I'll tell you a funny story about this game for a second, okay? I'm sorry to interrupt again.
No.
Funny story about this game. I had developed in that season, midway through the year, a ritual when I went to the press box, which was just bizarre. And that I had one, and this is me. I went and I would stop at Dunkin' Donuts. I would get myself a Mexican Coke, just like this one, and I would get a corn bread muffin toasted with butter, and I would eat it on the way to the game. So
it's called a corn muffin, but okay.
Yeah, okay.
Corn muffins too.
A corn muffin toasted with butter. My favorite corn muffins. I love them. So I would take it. I would eat it on the toasted, delicious, and I started doing this every time I went to the Flyers game, and when the Flyers went on their streak.
Do you know there's over 400 calories in that corn muffin?
Horrible.
Obviously, you were
either that or eat
high carb diet
in the Philadelphia media room, and I think that I was probably doing okay.
I don't know. I think it's a toss up.
And it wasn't butter. It was Mazola corn goodness.
Yes. That's really funny. Oh, there was another thing about Montreal here to bring it up, and the Dean Youngblood's bringing it up in the chat room. It's pretty funny. Anyway, so we'll get back to that. But so I had this. Now my 10th wedding anniversary was the night of that first game of Chicago and Philly, and I had set up for a long time this thing that we were going to redo our vows in up in like a lodge in the Poconos or something like that. And so I didn't go to game 1 in Chicago.
Right.
Cap Neo went without me out there. And before that game starting, I am going all over the God's creation up there in the Poconos, trying to find myself a corn muffin. And I'm like, I gotta get a corn muffin.
Revere them up there. They may not.
I couldn't find. And I got to a Dunkin' Donuts finally, and I'm like, oh, there's one muffin up there. So I'm like, I'd like that muffin. I'd like the corn muffin. Like, no, sorry, it's too late. We have to throw them out now.
Oh.
I'm like, I just want, I'll eat it. I don't care. I'll pay you $20 for it. And they're, no, we got to throw it out right now. I don't get the muffin. The Flyers lose 6-5. Go on, Mike.
Okay. I'm just going to fast forward through the story because we're going to get individual stories in every game.
I'm sorry.
Well, they're going to happen, yeah.
Game 2 was another Blackhawk victory, 2-1. So they went up 2-0 at home. Then the Flyers come back and win games 3 and 4 in Philadelphia, 4-3 in overtime, and then 5-3 in game 4 to tie the series.
Right. The 4-3 overtime game was hugely important, and that was a really good game. This was the era of Ville Laino, if you remember.
Oh yeah.
This was like when Ville Laino was like ridiculous. The Laino, Briere, Giroux line was killing it. That was the line that was destroying it. So I believe like Laino had something to do with that overtime goal.
Saber fans are still waiting for that Ville Laino to show.
Laino was clearly a passenger that was taking advantage of two great playmaking guys.
Yeah, so Laino and Alak, two guys who really made themselves famous during that playoff run. Both signed in the offseason for big contracts other places. Anyway, continue.
Game 5 back in Chicago was a 7-4 something.
That was a romp.
Massacre, yeah.
That was a romp, and that's the one I was thinking of. I was remembering they killed them in the game. That was the Hawks took them apart.
And then infamously, the game 6 ended up being 4-3 in overtime with Patrick Kane scoring the winning goal. And Russ, I have a response from Peter Harling, who's been on the show a few times, to your tweet regarding the game-winning goal.
Where's the goal puck?
Yeah, he says, I think Chris Pronger buried it along with Jimmy Hoffa.
Well, there's two things that could have happened, right? So when that goal scored, I had gone downstairs a little early.
That's right.
I was hearing things delayed and was actually watching it on the closed circuit monitor and still couldn't tell there was a goal. None of us knew. We're all frozen in time, right? So then
I was in the press box, I remember you had left.
Yeah, I didn't want to get stuck in the press box.
Right. You hate crowds.
And I think you actually during the time came downstairs because you knew there was a delay. So they delayed it. They find out it's a goal. So then we go to the Flyers locker room and they actually went into the Chicago locker room first and they let us in because all the guards know us. We see there's a lot of debauchery going on in there. We never were allowed, no reporters were ever allowed in an NHL locker room ever again since that Stanley Cup. It was always just out on the ice. Now, they did still go out on the ice, and we did that too. But I'll always remember that. Like, all of a sudden, we were allowed in, and then like a minute later, like, no, you guys have to leave. And we were like, okay, but we already got an eyeful, so whatever.
Yep. Yeah, it's really funny. And I mean, that was and those who remember, like the Pronger joke obviously goes back to that Pronger was stealing the winning pucks when Chicago would win the games, right? Because Chicago had been collecting their winning game pucks, and Pronger.
Pronger did take them. That's right. I didn't even.
And then we would show him. The funniest interview though was actually I asked him the question about this in the. It was just great. This was great, like captain stuff. And I'm like, "Are you taking the pucks?" And he's like, "No, I don't know what anybody's talking about." And I had my iPad and I showed him the video. I'm like, "Here you are, Chris, taking the puck." He's like, that was earlier in the game. I'm like, no, that's the end of the game. Oh, it was the funniest thing.
But here was the weird thing. So we get out of that locker room. We did go straight to the ice. And the players were still really celebrating, not really doing interviews yet. And we were in that goal area, and we never saw a puck. I remember looking in the net, kind of just sort of like seeing if I would see a puck. Yeah. And then we find out later nobody knows where the puck is. So to me, it's either Pronger or a ref. I'm gonna say it's a ref, and he's probably still reffing. And when he retires, that's when it'll go up for sale. I know other people think Pronger, but it really is amazing that we're talking about all these years later, and we have no idea where a Stanley Cup game-winning goal puck is.
That's
awesome. The problem is we'll never know for sure because
you never will. And
you will. Everything goes up for sale, at some point this will go up for sale.
Yeah, but how can they prove it's the real puck? Is what I'm saying. It's not like it's Mark McGuire's home run.
No, it's easy. They hologram all those pucks. Very easy to do. Yeah.
So the funny thing about this, as that goal happens, so my family was at the game in their seats. My mom, my wife, and my daughter. So 3 generations of X or whatever are in the crowd there, and they're all and so the goal happens. They see, and they're texting me, because we're in the press box. We're getting replays where, the crowd does not know what the hell's happened at all for a long time. The press box, we didn't see a replay for a long time either. But then they finally show a replay that proves it's a goal, and I have to tell I have to text back to my family that it's a goal, they lost. Yeah. So they're sitting there, which is a great, fantastic moment in memory of mine. And of course the way for the Stanley Cup Finals, there's always too much press for the press box. So we were not in the press box. Actually, we were in the stands. Like Elliot set up they set up rows of, you'll see like one section of stands taken away for the press in the Stanley Cup Final. We're in there, so there were fans like right across from us yelling to us like, "Is it a goal? Is it a goal? What happened?" Because we had the instant replays. It was a rough night for Flyers fans. Awesome night for Chicago fans. But
then the other weird thing is I posted on Twitter was I'm literally talking to Scotty Bowman because I just started interviewing him. First I was just chatting, and Jonathan Taves skates by with the cup. The whole thing was weird. But I'm telling you, guys like Glenn Macnow, some of the guys on the radio blame Michael Leighton for this series. Michael Leighton got him there. Like you can't blame that series on Michael Leighton. You know what you blame it on? The fact that the Chicago Blackhawks could fill the net, man.
The Blackhawks were much better. Remember, the Flyers team was not that good.
Yeah. I mean, how many goals? Crawford gave up quite a few goals.
No.
No, this was not Crawford.
It was Niemi. It was Niemi.
Niemi gave up quite a few goals.
Niemi had, but it was also good at times, and he was really good to get the Hawks there. If you remember earlier in the series, there was that Flyers team. Was that more than any other playoff run. I give credit to the coach for, and I don't often give coaches credit too much, but Peter Laviolette, the way he handled Boucher and Leighton helped get the Flyers there because it was back and forth constantly. It was. And then also remember the Laviolette timeouts 30 seconds into a game. And all that. Laviolette really did keep a mediocre Flyers team battling for a Stanley Cup way longer than they should have been. Like that was.
But think about it. Like those games you were saying 4-3, 7-4, 6-5. Niemi gave up a lot of goals.
They did. They gave up a lot, and the Flyers just found ways to do it. And a lot of it had to do with that line that we talked about, the Giroux-Briere, Lehner line. They were good at crazy important times. I mean, Lehner had a hat trick.
But if you think about it, I mean, the key turning point, and then we'll get off of this, the key turning point was the Krejci injury in Game 4 of the Boston series because Boston didn't win a game after that injury, and it turned the series around. I mean, you could probably say that Boston would have won one of those 3 games to close out the series, but without Krejci, they were.
Remember it was Mike Richards who took him out.
I think Krejci was Boston's leading scorer up to that point in the play.
He was, and we all said we were down. They knew we were down 3-0. That game, that was a quiet arena. Like the Flyers were down 3-0 in the series. They were down in that game when that Krejci thing happened too. It just looked like they were gonna get swept out, and it was pretty shocking when Gagne scored in overtime of that game to give them to extend it to a 5th game. It really just didn't feel like. Your hockey senses were like, this is ending. This is not going.
And
it was the building was loud, but it wasn't like it was oddly loud because it's here. They were so close to being swept.
That Flyers team, if you look at the regular season stats, it's very unusual to have 3 goalies almost even in goal played. They had Ray Emery at 29, the late great Ray Emery, Michael Leighton at 27, and Boucher at 33. That's unheard of.
And they all had their moments. I mean, Boucher gets them through Chicago, gets them through the Boston series is Boucher. And yet at the end of the day, it's Leighton who ends up playing better against the Hawks. It was just crazy. I mean, they all had their moments.
It was weird. I do have a memory too of being in after the Flyers beat Boston because it was in Philly, right? Did we determine that?
Yeah.
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 And
no, it was in Boston. It was in Boston. Flyers beat Boston in Boston.
So in 6
in Boston.
That's right. It was in Boston. So I have a memory of 6 then in Philly where they weren't worried. Like the Flyers at that point, knowing that they were sort of coming back, were not worried. That's what I sort of remember. I remember every one of them just being very positive, very calm. And, we were starting to think that it could happen. And it's so hard to do that in sports.
The series changed a lot after Game 5. I mean, after Game 4, when Gaudreau scores in overtime and they extend the series, everyone thought, like, we left the press box being like, okay, that's it. We'll go back to Boston. They'll go back to Boston and get killed. Like, that really was the feeling. And, we actually at that time, remember, didn't really know the extent of Krejci's injury either. So we're sitting there and okay, Krejci will be back or whatever, And then, Game 5, the Flyers handled them pretty easily, if I remember right. And it was like one of those things that made
4-0.
Yeah. Okay, so made Game 6 look like this could be something. And you're right. I mean, and then by the time it got to Game 7, it really kind of felt there's a destiny feeling when you take it from 3-0 back to 3-3 for sure. Like that at that point there's no question.
Yeah.
And then Game.
I think that was the first time because remember.
It was the first.
Well, no, it was the first time that a team came back from 3-0 since the 75
way back,
75 Islanders against the Penguins.
Right.
But I'm almost sure the Islanders that year did the same thing to Philadelphia in the conference final because they were up 3-0 and the Islanders came back and won the next 3, but then Philly won Game 7.
Yes, and of course the Boston, like we talked about Boston, the Boston Bruins recently had a Zoom with all those players watching the Stanley Cup again, and when asked what was the key to their winning the Stanley Cup, they all to a man said it was losing to the Flyers the year before the way they lost to them. They all said that being swept back like that just made them realize what you had to do, and how you had to play out the series, and it helped them win the Stanley Cup. So
if you want to put in order the teams that have had the most heartbreaking losses in the playoffs in the last decade. Obviously, from my point of view, I would say Toronto because of their losses to Boston 3 times.
From anybody's point of view, that would be Toronto. They are pretty heartbreaking.
But the other team is Boston because they lost Game 7 to the Flyers. They lost Game 6 to Chicago in 2013, and then they lose Game 7 against the Blues last year. So they've tasted heartbreak as well.
They really have.
Here's the proof that Leighton was actually better than Anthony Niemi in the playoffs. Niemi was a 1.32 GSAA and Leighton was a 3.11. Neither is particularly good, but it does show you that Leighton was actually worth more to the Flyers than Chicago needed Niemi.
Yeah, no, I think that was definitely an eye-opener.
And we found that later, and that was definitely true when Niemi got overpaid too.
Yeah. There's no question about it. So,
right.
Let's move on to what. You have any news, Mike? Before we go?
Well, we know that the voting for the postseason awards started yesterday. The NHL and the Professional Hockey Writers Association released the list of nominees for the 31 for each team. 31 names for the Bill Masterton Trophy. And I looked over the list while we were talking here, and there seems to be a few categories that like. There are multiple nominees in the same category, and I'll just go through them quickly. In the goaltender category of goaltenders who are maybe at the end of their reign, Ryan Miller is a nominee for Anaheim, Corey Crawford for Chicago, Jonathan Quick for LA, Alex Stalock is a backup, but they have him as the Masterton Trophy nominee for Minnesota, Henrik Lundqvist for the Rangers. And there was one more goaltender. Oh, Markstrom, but he's not at the end of his career. But I just found James Reimer for Carolina. He's definitely at the end of his career. But I just found it weird that there were so many goaltenders that you could sort of slot in the same category. And there were also a lot of guys who I think have struggled to stay in the NHL and finally maybe put a foothold. Like Curtis Lazar was the nominee for the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, that's a good nominee. I like that.
Yeah, Nathan Gerby for
Gerby's a great one.
Yeah. Let's see here. Jared. No, I wasn't aware. Did Jared Tenorti play a lot for Nashville because he was the nominee?
He played. Yeah, I think second half of the season he started to play a fair amount. Yes.
Now, I know Thomas Hickey was up and down with Bridgeport and the Islanders. I know he had injury issues. I think it was concussion. again, players that at the end of their career, Joe Thornton was nominated, Bouwmeester was nominated. Let's see here,
Bobby Ryan.
Bobby Ryan. I don't know if Bobby Ryan's at the end of his career, but he had the difficulties, the off the ice difficulties, and he came back. Yeah. But here's where I have a problem. Of course, I have a problem on one thing. Evgeny Malkin for Pittsburgh and Connor McDavid from Edmonton. What the hell? Give me a friggin' break.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think when you look at those guys that they even because it's supposed to be like perseverance and a few other things. I don't even think they check off anything but perseverance for Malkin. And McDavid hasn't played long enough. He overcame a knee injury. Is there? I mean, honestly,
there's like 100 players who've done that. It's ridiculous.
I know, and that's. I don't think the award should always be about overcoming an injury. That's why I think like a Nate Gerby is an interesting choice, because that is a guy who kept at it. He kept at it. He played in the AHL for a long time. He got back. He finally got back to the NHL. He clawed his way back.
Right.
He was never a regular it's been years since Buffalo, and he stuck with it. That to me is what the Masterton is really about.
I mean, Connor McDavid had that leg injury at the end in the last game of the regular season. I think it was Giordano that hit him, and he rehabbed it all off season. He didn't have surgery. I guess that was risky to do that, but he did it, and he came back, and he was, none the worse for wear. I get that. That to me, that's normal rehab. That's nothing like above and beyond. Now, it's easy for me to say because I wasn't the one rehabbing it, but when you put McDavid and Malkin got in shape last year. Supposedly he wasn't in shape the previous year, and he got in shape this year. Great. That deserves a not a Masterton nominee.
That shouldn't be a prize,
I mean, does Calgary just put Giordano in every year now because he's old?
Yeah, Shea Weber was the Montreal nominee. Maybe do you deserve disaster pay for being the captain of the Habs?
No, but he's been injured too.
But Giordano wasn't Giordano like their guy last year or the year before too?
I don't know.
I know he was.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean other names: Connor Garland, Arizona; Kevin Miller, Boston; Ryan Graves, Colorado; Stephen Johns, who I know struggled with some injuries with Dallas.
Lindblom.
Robbie. Oh, I was going to get there. I was just going alphabetically. Robbie Fabry, Detroit; Nola Chari, Florida; Stalock. Let's see, Travis Zajac for New Jersey; Oscar Lindblom for the Flyers. And I'll just say this: I really hope that Lindblom comes back. I'm sorry that he was diagnosed with cancer. I have members of my family who have had cancer. So I have all the sympathy, but this award is for perseverance. Doesn't that connote that he would have to come back to sort of persevere over something like that? I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I do
know what you're saying, but it did just finish all of his treatments, so it's hard to say.
Right. I mean, it's like
He hasn't played hockey again yet, but the feeling is he will.
Right. Well, I hope so. And I did, but Jay Bouwmeester was the nominee for St. Louis. He had that scary thing that happened at the end of the season. The expectation is he's never playing again. So is this a consolation prize for you deserve?
Yeah, it's a very undefined prize, I must say.
Well, it is, and that's a great way to
define, but it's very broad as to how they interpret the definition of it. I guess
super broad. It should be. I think it should be more clearly defined, if you ask me.
Yeah. I agree. But I'm not taking anything away from any of the the Leafs nominee was Zach Hyman. Zach Hyman blew out his ACL in the playoffs last year, came back a lot earlier than anybody thought, and tied his career high in goals in 20 less games last year. So he had basically a career year coming off an ACL tear, which we've known, there have been players, they come back from an ACL injury and they're not the same for a year or so, and he was better. So, I mean, that's why I think he was a good nominee for the Leafs.
I will say this, and then you're voting on this too. It's going to be hard. Like, this is not going to be an easy vote. There are a lot of worthy candidates.
I agree. Okay, we can
talk about favorite. Who's your favorite, do you think?
I don't know. I have to do a little research.
I mean, I'll tell you who I'm leaning towards right this moment. I'm leaning towards like Gerby, Achari, one of those guys, Tenorti. I think those are guys I'm leaning towards.
Yeah.
Now, Gerby wasn't out of the league as long as I thought, only a couple of years, but he wasn't getting tons of ice time. Tenorti, I mean, you want to talk about that guy was a first-round pick with Montreal, and it took him forever.
Yeah, he got claimed on waivers a couple times, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, true.
So.
All right, let's get into our next preview here, which is that we're going to be doing the previews, like we said, of three different kinds of previews. One will be the play-in matchups. We've done a couple of those. The teams already eliminated. We've done a couple of those. And today we start the number 3 category, which
I have my checklist here, so I'm checking them off as we go.
Very good. Number 3 category today would be the Philadelphia Flyers, who are in the top 4 teams in each conference category. So there's 8 of them, obviously. And so for them, we're kind of doing like a quick season review, how we think that they could, how they fare against the round robin teams, and who they might want to play in the playoffs, which gets much more complicated now that they have the seeding the way it is, or I mean the way they're reseeding every time.
Yeah, I mean it's like picking a number out of a hat.
Really, you can't. I mean, but what you can see is sort of a perspective on, there are still teams in there that they would rather play. Sure. So based on how they match up, we've heard how much Carolina hates matching up against the Rangers, right? So this does exist for a lot of teams. Let's talk a little bit about the Flyers. I predicted at the beginning of the year that they would either be a disaster or a big success, and I have to say they were a big success considering where they ended up. They didn't get there the most pretty way throughout the year,
no,
for sure, right? I mean that's easy to say, but I wasn't sure. I really thought this older school coaching thing, with Vigneault and Therrien, and I really wasn't a big fan of it. I have to admit, but that's why I thought it would either go well or go terribly. But really what happened this year for them was a couple young guys making another level step, which was Konechny and Provorov. Really both, I think, found another level. Provorov really continues to on a course after kind of like a rough year last year. But Konechny, I don't think anyone would have picked Konechny to be the leading scorer of the team. That's
no.
Even you have seen Konechny play a lot.
And he kept going. The arc kept going up, but it really went higher this year.
But to be a leading scorer, he just does find ways to score goals. We saw a little bit of I think the continuing maturation of Sean Couturier in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah. I still feel like he was their best player, even though Konechny may have been their highest scorer.
Yeah, and even though he may not have even put up the points on the same pace because he didn't play with Giroux as much this year, he still looked to be not only is he, one of the best defensive players, which everybody knows, but he's become one of the more calm and really confident offensive players. With the puck, there's very few players that slow the game down as well as Couturier does. If Couturier's got the puck, he manages he makes those.
And the physical nature of just him being stronger makes him hard to hold back in the offensive zone, and also he plays with more of an edge like he did in juniors because he was big in juniors, but he was lanky, but he was still stronger than a lot of guys. Then he was a good defensive guy, but he still was kind of weak for NHL standards. In the last 2 years, he's really gotten a lot stronger.
And what I've seen throughout time, and you've all seen this, is that the smarter the player is, the better offensively they are, the more space they end up getting. Couturier is given a lot more space than you'd expect, which enables him to slow the game down because players know that he's an incredibly intelligent player, and he's going to make them look bad if they just go right at him. So he's. Giroux had.
Remember, his dad's a former player and a coach.
Yeah, so which is part of the reason that Couturier made the jump right from the draft. Now Giroux fell back a little bit statistically, but not terribly. I mean, he's still at a more easily a fine enough year. But the big thing here, in my opinion, was the rise, of Jacob Voracek back into a little bit of prominence. He put up some numbers.
I won't say prominence. I'll say respectability.
Well, the numbers were better. Even watching him play, I didn't know the numbers he kind of did, but he had pretty good numbers.
His numbers overall in terms of points were great, but he only scored 12 goals.
Yeah.
And you can't avoid the fact that this is a guy who's being paid over $8 million.
Yeah, no, yeah, but this is also a guy that I thought should be cut at some points the year before this. I mean, he was so bad.
I wouldn't have cut him. No,
I know you wouldn't have, but I was so frustrated. I've been so frustrated with him watching his game. I mean, he's definitely been a lot better. The other thing the Flyers did right this year, I thought, was the two of their major pickups in Kevin Hayes and Matt Niskanen turned out to work out pretty well for them.
Yep.
Despite the fact you can still argue that long term they aren't the greatest moves, but short term they worked. For now they're working. Hayes did exactly what the Flyers picked him up to do.
Well, let me just say this, being to the outsider sort of looking in. I mean, because I was expecting at best Philadelphia to be a borderline playoff, non-playoff team, fighting for a wild card spot, and obviously their ascendance to the higher end of the Metro Division was a little surprising. But you got to factor in they were 10-2 in their last 12 games before the pause.
Well, yeah.
They're the hottest team in the league, and we don't know whether that team being that hot will be back when they resume play. I mean,
sure.
they're probably the team that least wanted to see this season shut down at the time that they, because they would have been going into the playoffs. It was only a couple weeks until the playoffs started, being the hottest team on a roll, possibly catching Washington. And now you're starting from, a standing start, and you don't know where that team is going to be. I mean, I personally think, Carter Hart had a much better year than I expected because I didn't think Philadelphia's defense was going to be as good. But under Vigneault, under Terrian, they played a lot better defensively than I expected them to. But I think that the team that they want to meet in the first round is a team that is not deep at center because they can't deal with that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think Carter Hart's season, Russ, was kind of an odd one.
It was because he wasn't great on the road. He was a little better towards the end on the road, but he wasn't great on the road. He didn't play a ton of road games. He was great at home. He was.
Yeah, which makes you wonder what's happening because, there are no home games. So, I mean, there are no – I mean, is the crowd on the road intimidating him, because there's no crowd either. So it's like you don't know what's going to happen with him.
You don't know what's going to happen with that. And look, Brian Elliott had a spectacular year and he didn't get hurt. So they're lucky if for some reason Carter Hart doesn't have it. They do have a guy. The other thing is you could say what you want. Their third pairing is not good.
No, for sure.
Robert Hagg is okay. He sort of got a little better under Vigneault. Gostisbehere is a complete mess right now.
Yeah. And he was a huge disappointment this year. And Elliott's just talk about Elliott for a second, Russ.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. Like I feel like Elliott stepped in and played great when he had to.
Especially on the road, right?
His save percentage is under 900, though.
But I wonder what it is on the road. I'm going to look that up.
It's got to be different, obviously. But regardless of his save percentage and stats, he just seemed to play well when they needed him to. Like at certain points, when Hart was falling apart, Elliott came in and played well. And then if Elliott played too long, he didn't play as well. So he really is kind of like in that perfect backup situation where you need him here and there. But if you've got to play him for like 10 straight games, Elliott's play falls off.
Yes.
You agree? It's considerable, I think. You're right about the Flyers ending, Mike. I mean, like before that 10-2, they're still not even sure if they're a playoff team. They're really battling around, and then that 10-2 hits, and then if they win the final game of the season, what turns out to be their final game, which no one really knows at the time, if they beat Boston in that final game, they win the Metro Division. They actually finished 1 point behind the Capitals, and they would have passed the Capitals with the same amount of games played. So that's how close they were to winning it at the same time. So 10-2 at the end. But here's the thing about that 10-2 that I think is why I'm going to say it's a little bit more real than not real. And the difference in that 10-2 was something that they hadn't done for like 3 years, which is play good first periods. Exactly. The reality of this Flyers team is they were terrible for the 2/3 of this year in the first period, and the last 3 years in the first period. This team played from behind all the time.
All the time.
Right. So now but that 10-2, I was looking up, they were much better in the first periods. And if they can turn that first period around, if that is something that they have overcome, then they are legit. It's just that by playing 3 periods, they put up a 10-2 record. Basically, by playing 2 periods, they were like a 500 team.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. All right, so Elliott's numbers are interesting.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is we have to remember the Flyers as a road team were 16, 15, and 3. And so it did affect Elliott too. Elliott started 19 of his 27 games on the road. And he still only had an .896 save percentage, but again, he was 12-5. So if you extrapolate that, they're in the position they're in because of Brian Elliott.
I really think that's
as much as they are because of Carter Hart, because Carter Hart was not winning road games for a long time.
And it feels that way too, not just extrapolating it, but it feels that way watching them. It feels like that Elliott got him there.
He's 12-5. I mean, odds, that's end of the day, they wouldn't have won 12 games if Hart played them all. They probably would have won 6 of them. the way he was playing.
And so let's look at the round robin situation, and the playoff and the playoffs to follow that. So against the three top teams, which is Boston, Tampa, Washington, three other top teams, the Flyers went 5-3-1. They beat Boston. They went 2-1 against Boston, 3-0-1 against Washington.
Yeah, Washington, I think they have a legit edge on. Yeah,
but lost both games to Tampa. Yeah. And has lost to Tampa consistently for like 3 or 4 years. Like Tampa has owned them. That's a team the Flyers don't play well against. So, you look at that, maybe they're kind of, I honestly feel like, Boston, and when all is said and done, 1 through 4, I don't want to do predictions yet, but I would say it's Tampa, Boston, Washington, Philly, somewhere in there. I think Philly finishes 3rd or 4th. I think
you're right. I just want to say, you know what, like, you know how there used to be a pitcher, and I'll use somebody that you watched a lot, Steve Carlton. Steve Carlton won 27 games once when his team only won like 58 games, right? So when you're pitching like that, you feel like you can't give up a run. When Carter Hart's in net, he won't tell us this, but I'm pretty sure he feels like he can't give up more than 2 goals, because if he does, against Tampa, they're going to lose because Vasilevsky may only give up 1, and they're going to probably score at least 3 on me most games. And that is a lot of pressure for a young goalie, and I think that's what they're up against with Tampa. Now, Boston, I want to say I really do think this year's record against Boston is probably more of an aberration. I think a healthy Boston team, when they play the Flyers, it's almost as hard to beat as Tampa, and maybe even harder.
I agree with that. I mean, one of their wins was in overtime, a 6-5 game against Boston, which is bizarre.
Yeah.
And the other game was very early in the season, where they went to Boston and won early in the season. Yeah, but you have to wonder what Niskanen's influence on them being able to beat the Capitals has meant, because I feel like it has meant something. Like, I feel like that.
Yeah, maybe. I think the steadiness. I mean, Niskanen gives
just even him being able to talk to them about how to play against that team, because
it could be.
They this is not a Flyers team that was good against the Capitals the last several years, but this year they were really good against them.
I think that has to do with, again, I speak to Capitals writers, and I think you would agree with this. They take a lot of games off. Now, in this situation, they may not be able to, because, you got to pretty much start running. But there were games, and I attended one with Ted Starkey, who watches the Caps a lot, and that was one the Flyers scored 2 goals quickly on the Capitals, and that was probably with like maybe 3 weeks to go in what we know now is the end of the season. Yeah, and and that seemed like one of those games where the Caps just were like,
didn't show up.
And you got to realize that the last 2 years, at least in the regular season, Holtby has not been overall really good. I mean, he turned it on after Grubauer sort of dropped the ball in the year that they won the cup, and he took over and he played like he normally played. But the last 2 regular seasons, he's been pedestrian at best, and maybe Philadelphia has just taken advantage of that. But I look at the matchups against those 3 teams. Maybe they're on par with Washington, because they might have caught them if the season had gone on, but. Boston and Tampa, seeing them as much as I've seen them over the last couple of years, I think they're the class of the East.
Yeah, they are.
I'd be surprised if they're not 1-2 when it comes to seeding in the top 4.
I mean, I'll give you
go in a couple minutes here, so I
got to go in a minute, but I'll give you one X factor.
Go ahead.
As hot as Scott Lawton was, do we know he's going to be that hot when the season starts again? Because that made a big difference to their goal output. It did.
Finally, I'll let you know. Think of this, Russ, as you leave. The Flyers went 17-5-3 against the teams that are playing in play-in situations. That is an unbelievable record.
That's a great number.
I don't think anyone's going to beat that number as far as against playoff teams.
No.
And they're only one of the 8 playoff teams they had a losing record to in the play-in.
I give Vigneault a lot of credit for that. I like Vigneault as a coach. I told you that. I like the Hayes. I said that when they did it. I had a feeling he was going there. All those things have worked out. I think those will continue to work out. It's just whoever they play in that first series, it's not a gimme that the Flyers advance. They're going to have to still play that same hockey they played at the end of the season. If they don't, they could have trouble.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks, Russ.
All right.
I'm going to show you this, Mike, because to your credit, Mike, what you said before about them playing against teams that have good centers,
Mm-hmm.
Their record against Columbus, the Rangers, and Carolina is 10-0-1. And you're talking about 3 teams that don't have great centers.
Yeah, right? They have one good center, like Zibanejad with the Rangers, but they really Ryan Strome is the number 2, or Dubois is the number 1 for Columbus, but they don't really have a great number 2. And what was the other team? The
Carolina, the Rangers.
Carolina's got Stahl or got Aho, but Stahl is a slower veteran. So I mean,
now against your Leafs, they went 2-0-1, and that Leafs obviously are stacked at center.
Yeah, well, from the Leaf perspective, it was 1-1-1 because they lost in a shootout. Right. They won in a shootout, and then So I know
his record looks better because of the way the NHL does things. But it's 2.
Right, exactly.
But they didn't end up with 2 wins and 1 loss. You know, if you just want to go straight up wins and losses, the Flyers won 2 of the games. The Leafs won 1. Right. They went 2-1 against Montreal. They went 2-1 against Florida. Yeah, they went 2-1 against Florida. Who do tend to give the Flyers fits to Florida. Right. Both Florida and Tampa are not nice to the Flyers in general. They went 1-1-1 against Pittsburgh, so they actually do have it actually did lose more.
Crosby was out. I think we talked about that Crosby was out at the time that they played them.
No, they didn't, because the interesting thing about that, I didn't check those games, but they didn't.
I think it was two of the 3 that he was out.
2 of the 3 that he was out now?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I'm not sure.
I think we talked about it. I think
we talked about that, but not against the Flyers, I don't believe.
Okay,
because the Flyers Penguins had this weird thing where they didn't play until very late in the year. Like they played one game early in the year, and then they still had a game to go. They hadn't played. The Islanders are the only team they didn't beat. They went 0-2-1 against the Islanders. So that's basically 3 wins for the Islanders, none for the Flyers. So Islanders and Florida, 2 of the tougher teams, they play each other. Pittsburgh and Montreal, the other 2 tough teams, they play each other. So there's a 50% chance the Flyers are going to play somebody that's tough against them.
Yeah, they played Pittsburgh back-to-back before and after the All-Star break in late January.
Right, that's late, isn't it?
Yeah, but those were I think those were the last 2, unless they played late in the season, and obviously they did play late. That's been scrubbed off the schedule because those games aren't going to be played anymore. So
they definitely had another game with them for sure. So what's interesting is that the teams that they did not lose to in regulation, at least, play each other. So like you have Columbus and Toronto, the Rangers and Carolina.
Pittsburgh, they went 1-1-1. Pittsburgh beat them 7-1 in late October. Then Philly won 3-0 in before the All-Star break, and then Pittsburgh won 4-3 in overtime on the 31st of January.
Right. There you have it. Okay, so some of them were maybe some with Crosby, some without Crosby for sure. That does play a factor. I mean, Couturier is a Malkin killer, but not a Crosby killer.
Right.
And that changes things a lot, the way they have to do things. So so when you look at who they want to play, they would
with reseed. This is the thing. I mean, it's all
about they do. I know.
Yeah, it's all dependent on how they do in the round robin. So, but if I had to guess, I think they're either going to be 3rd or 4th in the round robin, and that means you probably play the best or second best of the teams that come through. And if that's the case, then it could be Pittsburgh. It could be
Pittsburgh. Could be Toronto.
It could be Toronto or Columbus. It could be Florida. So it's like, I mean, it's more than if there's one upset, then everybody moves down a little bit. So that would help. But I think they're going to end up playing Pittsburgh, and I honestly think that's a bad matchup for them.
It always feels like they end up playing Pittsburgh somehow. So it's a bad matchup, but it's always a heck of a lot of fun. So we'll see what happens with it. And it has a tendency to be a bad matchup both ways. Like there's years when Pittsburgh can't beat Philly. There's years when Philly can't beat Pittsburgh. So the interesting thing about this year, that they did basically split it. Kind of, I don't know. We'll see. It's I mean, how far can they go in the playoffs? It's a tough call. I mean, I think that their first round matchup is going to be hard. It was going to be hard anyway, but it's like you say. I mean, they don't.
The matchup, I think they can win a round.
Yeah, I think they could win a round if they get the right matchup. You're right. I don't. If I look at these teams, I do like them against Columbus and the Rangers. I really do. I think both those teams they would take pretty easily. Carolina and Toronto would be a lot harder for them, even though they played well against both teams. I think that you're talking about, speed, a little bit more speed on those teams. That does play into the Flyers. Defense isn't the fastest. That's the issue. The speed on their defense, especially, when Gossipierre is not playing that much and is not, playing that well, their defensive speed, Niskin's not that fast. Haig's not that fast. But I think they'd be fine against Montreal. But I don't think they're going to have to face the Islanders because the Islanders will probably, unless the Flyers win the round robin type thing, the Islanders are probably going to be down the bottom of that sort of situation. So,
right.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But anyway, there you have it. That's a look at the Flyers. We'll be back again with more.
Yeah, maybe tomorrow. We'll do the Islanders in Florida.
Yeah, we see that. That sounds like a good idea. We'll see the Islanders in Florida tomorrow. I think we'll have. That's a fascinating series. It's a rematch of a playoff series a couple years ago. The Islanders won with a Tavares overtime goal, if you remember.
Oh yes.
That was a big one. Like Tavares' last big play as an Islander, basically. So that'll be that'll be fun.
Yeah. So we'll do that.
All right, we got a question from
okay,
from somebody here, and I want to take that question. Sorry, not you, Funky. I mixed the wrong thing. All right. Sorry about that. All right, Rich, and I'm sorry about not seeing this. I was too busy in my notes. Are you playing kids like Frost and Farabee or vets like Thompson, Raffle, etc.? I like etc. a lot. He's a good player. Let me think.
I think they're playing Thompson. Otherwise, they wouldn't have traded for him. They're playing Grant. They're playing Thompson. They're playing the guys they traded for. Not to say that Frost and Farabee couldn't contribute, but you want a veteran guy in there. And remember, it's like we're not putting Frost or Farabee in a top 9 role. We're talking about Nate Thompson playing 4th line minutes. And with those players, it's do no harm. Don't make a mistake because that can turn the game around.
Yeah, and Derek Grant had an unbelievable 7 games for the Flyers too. That's the other thing you have to remember. That turned into like one of the better trade deadline acquisitions as far
5 points in 7 games is pretty good.
5 points in 7 games, and beyond that, just looked like he really filled a spot that they needed. He's tough. He's physically, he's nasty. He really filled a spot that they needed to kind of take that pressure away from like Giroux having to do that kind of stuff. So
he's playing for a contract.
He's playing for a contract. He's playing hard, and he is not a bad player. I mean, I've never having seen him play as much, obviously, because of Anaheim, I wasn't really following them that much the last couple of years here. I was impressed. Grant has a definite thing going on. We have another question here from Brandy Workman in the chat room. We'll go with this. But I agree with Mike, by the way, on the answer to that last question. I don't think Frost or Farabee are going to see the ice in all likelihood. I think both are going to be huge players for the Flyers in the future, but. Mm-hmm. For the playoffs, I can't see Vigneault going young like that. Like I think he's going to stay experienced. Who gets Gaudreau? The Flyers or the Devils? This is my article I wrote yesterday because yesterday I was talking to some sources and basically saying that the Devils had a really good shot at Johnny Gaudreau. Like this is the first time I've heard of Johnny Gaudreau. I have sources within Devils. I have sources with Johnny Gaudreau who grew up near here. I know some of his coaches from juniors and from so I really feel like there's a shot here. This is the first time I felt. There've been a lot of Gaudreau rumors over time, but I really feel like that the Devils with all the draft picks they picked up and Calgary's definite interest in Taylor Hall, it lines up pretty nicely that Gaudreau could end up on the Devils.
But here's the issue though. Gaudreau has, I believe, 2 years left at $6.75 million. He's coming off a little bit of an off year, but we know he's a quality player.
Yeah.
The Devils, they need name players. Right now, Subban was a bust in his first year, but he's hopefully going to bounce back next year. They have some good young players. They're hoping Jack Hughes will have a better second year than he did a first year, and obviously Heishier, who they just signed to a long-term deal. What are you giving Calgary? You're not. It's like you're not.
I know.
Calgary is going to expect something of significance, and you're not going to be able to pass off like a Pavel Zacha and say, okay, it's going to have to be a significant piece, and that's the issue. It's like what.
But the Devils, remember all the draft picks they picked up. Lots of first-round draft. They have a couple first-round picks too, like in that.
Right. I mean,
Arizona's first-round pick that they got. They have.
If Brad Treliving is interested in draft picks, then I think it's a possible deal because I'm just looking up what New Jersey has here. They have 3 first-round picks, unless the Canucks. Lose to Vancouver, then I think it moves to the following year. But they would have Vancouver's, Arizona's, and their own.
Right.
So they could give up a first and probably have to give up something else on top of that. Is that enough for a Johnny Gaudreau? I don't know. Unless Brad Treliving is
that's pretty good. If you give up,
pretty good, but it's unless Brad Treliving knows that he's got Taylor Hall and knows. No, you got to remember, what are they going to pay for Taylor Hall? Taylor Hall is not going to be a $6.75 million player. He's going to be $8 to $9 million because he's a free agent, unless he takes a hometown discount. And I don't think after going through Jersey and going through Arizona, he's taking anything less than what Jeff Skinner got from Buffalo.
I don't know. I do know that he is the same kind of, what I've been told from everybody who knows him and people around, that he's got the same kind of passion for playing for them that Tavares had for playing for Toronto.
Okay.
But he wants to go there in the worst way. And Hall is not the kind of guy. I think he would go a little bit less to help the team in the future too, so they wouldn't have to make all kinds of crazy.
But Tavares still took $11 million from Toronto. I mean, he still got.
No, there's no question. I mean, Tavares. I think I think I would expect actually maybe Hall would take a little less than Tavares took.
But
and he's not Tavares. He shouldn't get the number Tavares got anyway. But I'm just saying that.
And maybe the 2 years is enough for New Jersey to trade a first-round pick because Gaudreau only has 2 years left in his contract. Maybe they can work on him to see that they don't lose him like they lost Hall or have to trade him after a year. They want some stability with that organization. The question is who you're dealing with in terms of the general manager, too. You don't know who the general manager is going to be in New Jersey. So if it's Fitzgerald, that's still up in the air. So I mean, there are a lot of things.
It sounds like it is going to be Fitzgerald, really
right? But there are a lot of things that have to fall into place before they start addressing acquiring a franchise level player like Gaudreau.
I also want to dispel some other myths here that Gaudreau is returning to his home in New Jersey, which is Gaudreau is from New Jersey, but he's, as a kid from South Jersey, I can tell you that where the Devils play and North Jersey and South Jersey are very much like two different states in so many ways. And this, you're talking about the difference between like Devils fans and where Gaudreau grew up a Flyers fan. So you're totally, they're very different worlds. It's not really his hometown. Gaudreau returning home for him would be more going to Philadelphia than it would be going to the Devils. But I don't, and maybe after these, and the Flyers, as far as picking him up in a trade now, which has also been rumored, there's just no way they could do it, unless they absolutely. I mean, there are always ways you can do it. It would have to give up maybe Frost and Farabee and something like that would be the thing, and that's a lot to give up. But if they wanted to do something like that, but then they still don't have the money to make it happen. So at the end of the day, I think that the Devils have the money and they have the draft picks. They're in a really good spot to do it.
I would think that the Flames would be looking for defensive help simply because look who's Brody's a UFA, former Islander defenseman. I'm drawing a blank. Shucks, I have to look at the one who requested the trade from the Islanders because his family.
Yeah, why can't I think of this either? What the hell?
Yeah,
Tyron will get it.
Yeah, somebody will.
I do think that
Hamonic.
Thank you. Yeah. The most traded man's rights in history.
They have 5 unrestricted free agents on the blue line: Brody, Hamonic, Forbert, who they got from L.A., Gustafson, who they got from Chicago, and Michael Stone. So they're going to be looking, if they're trading a guy like Giordano more than a first-round pick, they're going to be looking for a defenseman. So does that mean that Damon Severson is somebody that they'd be interested in from New Jersey? Does it mean that if they were trading with Philadelphia? I mean, I don't know about Gostisbehere. I don't think that would fly. Because I think they'd have to give up a lot more than that. Would it be somebody else? They're not trading Provorov. Would it be Sanheim? I mean, Sanheim would make sense, but
Sanheim would make sense. But it could be like there's Myers too, and Flyers fans would hate to hear that name thrown out there because Myers. Flyers fans love Myers on defense, but he's another one who
I think they'll be looking for somebody more established. Because I mean, I'm saying
Gostisbehere is an interesting name because there's all different sorts of opinions on Gostisbehere throughout the NHL. And if you get somebody who thinks that Gostisbehere is just not being used right in Philadelphia or whatever, it still has the skill to be like the Calder Trophy finalist like he was, then, you're looking at, Gostisbehere is still young and still can turn things on.
Right.
So that's a possibility. I mean, he's, to me, Gostisbehere is just not a defenseman. Like he's playing the wrong position. He's
right.
got
a rover,
skill, but he's just not a defenseman.
He's an American Sergei Gonchar. He's a rover.
Yeah, he is. But Myers and Frost, someone is saying Myers and Frost for Gaudreau.
And Sam Bennett.
And Bennett. I just don't see the Flyers being able to afford that. That the issue is that either contract-wise, they'd have to take money back, and there's no money in Myers.
Yeah, that's an $8 million net going back to the Flyers.
Yeah. That's the problem is the Flyers are capped out pretty much. Remember they did sign, like we talked about Kevin Hayes and big contracts. So 2 years from now, if Gaudreau does make it to free agency, I think Philadelphia will definitely be in the cards. They've got a possibility at that point. But before that, I wouldn't expect it. But I do think New Jersey, it'd be interesting to see. I don't know if Gaudreau would want it. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. Really.
We'll find out.
Guys, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks again for watching. And remember, you can support us at patreon.com/hockey and just throw a couple shekels our way if you get something out of the show and you feel like you enjoy it every day.
We like shekels.
We like doing it too. So if you can't put money in for it, just please share it around and maybe retweet it, or Mike tweets it out every day. You can retweet his tweets and get it out there for sure.
Yeah. So if you have Elon Musk's personal email, send it in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, here we go. I remember without the buzz, folks. It is just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow.